1980 Jeep CJ7, produced by the American Motors Corporation. This one happens to have some Chev garbage V8 engine in it, small block, backed up by a 3-speed auto magic, or maybe it's 4-speed, don't know, don't really care. That right there is a Dana 30. Leaf springs underneath of the axle. This thing's sitting on 35-inch mud tires. It's actually a pretty neat little truck, low pinion, Dana 30. And it's a ball joint front end, but it comes with all the complexity of 1980s American Motors bullshit. So today we're going to be doing brakes in it. First step, of course, is going to be to support the front axle, because we're going to need to take the tire off. So step number 2, use your impact gun with a safety rated 1/2 inch to 3/4 or to 3/8 adapter, and then a chrome socket to remove your lug nuts. And then this thing has sicky wheel spacers on it. I think those are 13/16. So again, we're gonna run those off. Use the impact gun in this 13/16 impact socket. Now this is of course the 13/16 wheel spacer nut. It's about the same dimensions as my cock. So yeah, that's chill. Once you get those removed, pull the spacer off, and then you can leave it in 2-wheel drive. These are 9/16 bolts. You want to pull these 6 of these out. Just for side note as well, this is a 2-lug per steering knuckle truck versus the 78 and earlier Dana 30s or whatever Dana axle they used. Maybe it's even American Motors. I don't know. But that has 6 bolts holding this caliper on, so this is 2-bolt. Here's your spacer. Go ahead and put that off the side. Get this zipped off. Let's take these 6 9/16 bolts out. The spring pressure from the back of this pawl right here. You can see there's a spring. Set some shit down here. You can see there's a spring. Pushes it forward. There's a little snap ring here, so you're gonna need a pair of snap ring pliers. Oh good, I wonder if this one's busted. Maybe it's just being a piece of shit. Know that snap ring's all the way seated. Weird. Anyway, yeah. So you'll need to take those out, and then take this snap ring out. You'll need external type pin and snap ring. Once you have this snap ring, and as you can see, I use this Carlisle pair of pliers. There's part number. You can pull that off, and it just slides off this way. There's no indexing key or lug or nothing. This is a big socket you'll need. This one's 2 3/32, but you're supposed to use 2 1/16. But it's AMC, so that one's 3/8. So yeah, for this part you'll need a 3/8 to crack the bleeder. And I'm going to soak these in PB Blaster, as well as this one has different brake lines on it. So to get this bolt out, I have to pull this whole brake line, which is fine because I was going to bleed the brakes anyways. But if you don't want to bleed the brakes, well, I'm sorry, you're probably going to have to if somebody retrofitted this. I'm not sure about the original design, but you'd probably still have to loosen the nut, or loosen the banjo bolt at the very least. I don't know. But yeah, soak them in PB Blaster, then run them. Okay, so now that we have gotten this soaked in PB Blaster, go ahead and use a box end of a wrench. You want to make sure that these bleeders are clear, because there's 2 passages. There's a passage drilled lengthwise through this bleeder from my finger to the bottom here, and then there's a smaller passage, that hole right there in the bottom, yeah, right above my thumb, that is drilled so the 2 passages intersect and make an L, and they get filled up with crud and shit. So yep, just make sure that these 2 are clear. I usually spray them out with some brake clean, or you can use a small drill bit as well. But you can see there's light down in there coming from the side, and that light goes away and comes back. So that means that it's clear. So I'm just going to give it a slight spritz. Well, you know what they say, I hate God and also grease. So you're going to want to get all of this brake clean, brake fluid, sorry. Oh, I got a splinter in me. All over your hands, because they say that it can like cause your liver to shut down if you drink it. And I'm sure that getting it on your skin is really good too. But you don't need to worry about that. It's actually good, like if you believe it's good, which I do, because I like believing in things. You know, I like having faith. And then make sure both the crush washers come out. As you can see, there's a crush washer back here, and there's a crush washer up against the head of the banjo bolt. Man, this shit's toxic. You can just feel it eating your skin away. It'll eat paint. It's like a goat. It'll eat anything. Take a 19mm socket and a waddle and your impact gun, and then come to the back of these. And it don't matter if you spray these with PB Blaster. Everybody's like, you spray the big ones with PB Blaster. Well, it's not going to penetrate the threads in 3 minutes. So, unless it's super duper rusty, then I don't usually bother. Once it's cracked loose and there are a few threads exposed, then I'll spray it. But right here, it's just a 19. And then there's a bolt up top, back in there. Yeah, you can see it. And we'll take those two loose. And you can pull this brake caliper off. And I'll show you how to split this brake caliper apart too. It's actually kind of a pain in the ass. I'm not really partial to this design, but whatever. It seems to work. So once you get that brake caliper off, first of all, you'll want to note how the brake pads came out. So this guy has a shim, a bigger one, and it goes on this side like that. So the big one with the weird bottom plate goes on the outside, leaving the smaller one to go on the inside. Both sides have shims for spacing, I think. I really don't know why they put shims on brake calipers. It's kind of weird to me, but you'd think the caliper and the piston, it'd just take it up, but whatever. Oh, and then the next thing that you'll want to do is, oh wow, this phone's filming upside down again. I think I'm going to throw this phone across the room. I think I'm going to destroy it. This is the biggest pile of garbage fucking piece of equipment. Oh my god. Anyhow, so what you'll want to do is take a spreader like this, and then I think it's 5/16. Yeah, 5/16 wrench. Fits on the tip, just like that. And then I'll go ahead and put this guy into something. Place the caliper spreader in there, and then spread the piston apart. And actually, you can use the brake pad that goes on the inside here to push against. But you'll just want to make sure this piston's bottomed out against the bottom of its travel and its bore. One thing you don't want to do, though, is push this fluid back up through the system, especially on a car with ABS, because the anti-lock braking system has a pump in it, and that pump has real small orifices, you know, 3/1000, 5/1000, as well as a lot of valving in there. So if you push sediment back up through it, it can plug the ABS pump. And if you were doing that for a customer, well, then you get to buy somebody a $3,000 ABS pump on all of these new Fords and stuff. So, yeah, don't even get me started on the Mercedes. Holy Christ. But, yeah, so I always bleed the brakes when I do a brake job if I have to press the pistons back in, which you should probably bleed the brakes just about every time you have to change the pads and the rotors, because, you know, brake fluid is very hygroscopic. It absorbs a lot of water, so it also degrades because, you know, it gets up to 300 or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're really braking hard on it, you don't want it to boil. So what you'll need to take this brake caliper apart is a couple of different hammers. You'll need something to break it loose with a 3/8 breaker bar, and then this is a 1/4-inch socket, and that fits in this hex head, a 1/4-inch hex head socket rather. Take some PB blaster and then squirt along the these things all are fucking nothing. Anyhow, squirt all the way along these two slide thingies. I don't know what they're called. Stupid piece of shit. And then I also want a screwdriver, because you're going to have to drive it back and forth. But basically what's going to happen is I'm going to knock this piston assembly back and forth inside of the mounting bracket, such that it's free. And then you'll notice there's a spring clip. This is a spring retainer that presses, so it's a leaf spring and it's arched like this, and it presses against the caliper to hold the caliper in the bracket here. So I don't remember which way it goes. I think it goes out this way. I think it comes towards me, and then that leaf spring and everything will fly apart if you're not careful, but it's not a huge deal. It came apart fine on the last one. And then you'll be able to clean up the slide surfaces. These are equivalent to the slide pins in a more modern design. Slide pins are better because you can protect them with rubber boots, whereas these are fucking fully open to the environment and they seize all the time, which is what I think happened to cause the brand new brake rotor on the other side to warp. Not to mention it was probably a shitty quality rotor. Don't get a bunch of brake clean or other solvents, especially brake fluid, on the rubber of the caliper piston. And then there's a couple other spots where the brake pads are supposed to slide in and out. Yeah, right there on this side and then this side. So I'm going to use a brush to clean those up, or maybe just that thing, a Wizzy wheel. But yeah, let's get to this. Here's the hub seal part number. I'm just using Napa parts. SKF does pretty good shit. This is a 2.30125, I think, inch inner diameter seal. Could be wrong, don't know. And then this is the part number for the 5-lug, 2-bolt per knuckle rotor on the later Dana 30s, I take it. Okay, so here's this bolt, once it's removed. And then, let me see if it'll move. I got this clamped in a vise. Yeah, so you see how it moves back and forth? This one moves a lot freer than the other side did. And it hits against there, so I don't remember which side has to come out. Or maybe, no. You get that screwdriver and you have to drive this spring retainer assembly out. And I think you can drive it, I think you can only drive it out the front. Yeah, because if you try to drive it out the back, it'll get bunged up, I think, on this corner or something like that. I don't know. We'll try it. We'll see which way works. All right. So once you get the slide block out, of course, note that these cutouts correspond to where this would go, or this goes near the hole, right? If this were on the other side, then this slide block would go like this, and the hole would be right here. Like it was on the other side. But this one goes this way. Doesn't really matter. Kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, because it's the same casting. Likewise, note that this leaf spring goes toward your towards your caliper assembly, and then I'll try to jimmy this sucker out. I don't remember quite how it... Oh, just like that. Weird. The other one didn't want to slide in. Maybe I just had it too far up in the bench vise. But yeah, no, it slides in and out, and then it's just like that, and then, yep. Okay. Then maybe this will give you a better view. Yeah, there's a couple of slide spots. There's one right here and one right here that need a little grease. So we'll go ahead and just wipe those out. And then likewise, we'll wipe everything off, clean it up, grease it, and then, yeah, because we got the CarQuest, the blue stuff. The little blue bottle right there above my finger is ceramic brake parts lubricant. I've also got an orange bottle from Napa, so you know what they say, every heart beats true for the orange and blue. Guess I'm from fucking Holland. You're all greasy. Better rub you off. Okay, so you're going to want to lube like here, but only on the outside, but also on the underside so it sticks, but not like in the very, very underside because there's like 2 undersides. And you want to lube here and you want to lube here, but only like a little bit, but like enough that it can slide. But again, like only a little bit, and also here. You don't want it to like attract dust, but you want it enough to slide, but like it's going to attract dust, which is like a retarded design anyways because it's like open to the air. So I just put a lot on, but actually not too much. And you're also going to want to lube this, and then there's like a spot right there that you're going to want to lube. And then I did the same on this side. You know, I lubed it up, but not as well because, like, I don't know, I'm a bitch. And then, yeah, and then you're going to want to shove it together. You'll probably have to, like, beat it together. I can't really show it to you one-handed because you have to hold the brake caliper and, like, work it and then use the hammer to beat this stuff back in, which is retarded, but I guess that's what you have to do. Because, yeah, I think you take this block, you put it out here, the caliper is, like, sitting part way out, and then you shove it together and you beat this. Yeah, so like I said, you're going to have to drive it in from the front because this back keeps it from, like, popping apart. So you can only really pop it apart on the bench because it can't slide forward once you get that pin in. But, yeah, so slide the caliper on first like this without the block in place. And then shove the caliper to the back, work it this way, like kind of in an arc up this way, and then get just enough room that you can use your left hand to wedge it in there. And then once you do that, hold the caliper with your left hand and put your thumb like right here or right here and then beat this in. Or maybe you'll have to hold the spring against the slide block and then you can beat this in. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. I think this was the right way. Okay, so you're gonna put a dab of blue thread locker on this thing, and then like, I like brake clean the hole out and shit, so that way it wouldn't be full of shit. And then just thread this in there by hand, and then, oh man, you're getting a close up of the chode thumb. God damn. This thing's like 3/4 the length of a normal thumb. It looks like a big toe, and that's good, you know? It's good to have a chode thumb. It's good to have multiple chodes on a single body. Because yeah, it just means that you're more powerful as a man and more like virulent and stuff, because that's definitely how that works. Yeah, now somebody was like wanted me to do a bunch of tranny work, and I put a torque converter in something and tore apart the front end of the 4R100 in this greasy fucking 99 3/4 ton Ford. And then click, it's tight, but don't strip it out. Like, clean the hole out before you put this in, or otherwise you will strip it. The thing was fucking real close to stripping. I think somebody already did. You can see how it's kind of deformed there. Anyhow, Yeah, and so I did, because like so the stock torque converters in a 4R100 are like kind of weak, and if you put more than 10,000 pounds behind them, they'll like puke their guts out, and they'll put a lot of pressure because the torque converter clutches burn up, and so it'll force a lot of pressure out the front seal. And so yeah, I put a front seal in it, and I tore the front pump apart and tore the things apart, and it smelled kind of like a burnt clutch inside of automatic transmission fluid, but the transmission fluid wasn't burnt, which was really weird. So like, okay, whatever. And then I take it to the transmission shop in Four Corners, and they're like, yeah, you got a toasted torque converter. So I was like, all right, that's fine. So I put a torque converter in it, like a billet torque converter, but that was several $100s. They're not cheap, but anyhow, they're good for up to like 400 horsepower. And then his wife, now they're married. Anyhow, she's like, oh yeah, I checked the tranny fluid in it, and it doesn't look like it has any. And I put like 14 quarts in, because I don't remember what the capacity is, but that was up to the full line when it was hot and running. So whatever. Maybe they blew another torque converter out of it, because it didn't leak. Oh, and I also put a speedy sleeve and a rear main seal in that thing, because it's a greasy old 7.3 Power Stroke that was owned by some 19-year-old kid from Three Forks or something. Real good, well-balanced communities. Okay, so once you're done with that, beat it forward to make sure that it moves, and beat it back. They're not going to move real freely, generally, because that spring's going to hold it and create a lot of friction. Yeah, make sure everything looks good, and then you can like put it back together. I mean, I guess if that's what you're trying to do to free up one of these brake calipers, it seems to work fine. Like, it's really not the best design in the world, but whatever. I mean, that's why they have slide pins in these modern cars, because if you're going to have disc brakes, you might as well. I personally really like drum brakes, but like the S-style cam in a semi-truck, which is way better than the fucking stupid, complicated ass. Next thing that you're going to do is get a 2 1/16 inch socket, which this definitely isn't, but it's close enough. You could also use a 53 mil deep well socket if you can find it. Only reason I say deep well is because the stub shaft of the axle here is going to hit against the like shallow well 2 1/16 sockets that they sell at Napa. But anyways, nobody around here sells a 2 1/16 because they're all retarded, and all these old Dana 30s, and I think the 44s on the small trucks even have these 2 1/16 sockets, but whatever. And you'll want to go ahead and loosen these off. There's an outside nut, and then there's a washer, and then there's an inside nut, and then there's another washer, and then there's the bearing. So you can make sure that you keep those in order. But yeah, this is a 3/4 drive. So I got my big bar on my crotch. Gotta love that view. Please clap. God damn. Ugh. Well, anyways, you get the picture. The torque spec on the outer nut, I think, is 175 pounds, which these definitely aren't. But you don't need to worry about that. Well, I think I walked off with my magnet. I don't know where it is, which is kind of annoying, because like it always lives in one place, and now it's not in the one place that it's supposed to live, which it always lives, which is right there. And it's not over here either. I mean, it might be on the floor, but I don't think it's on the floor. I mean, I probably put it somewhere retarded, and now I can't remember, but anyways, you can also use a pick for this, which is probably what I'm going to do, because I don't want to have to go look for my magnet, which is probably down in there somewhere. Also, if you're rebuilding a saw, like, be careful that you don't get a bunch of garbage down in there, because it can like cause the main bearings to seize, and then you have to do everything over again, but it's like harder because you have to press it apart. I don't enjoy that. It's not fun doing this job the second time and then having to spend your own money, but at least the piston and rings and jug are fine. But anyways, take your pick, and this is like one of the Matco, or maybe this is a Mac pick. No, it's a Mac pick. It's pretty nice. Somebody stole mine, so I stole this one. So I'm a good person. I'm not a good person, but anyways, yeah. So this washer goes on the outside. You can see it's got that tang right there that indexes with the axle spindle. It indexes with the spindle, and it faces in like that, so that way it doesn't interfere with the outer nut. And then, there's that pick right there. And then you want to take this inner nut loose, and honestly, not quite hand tight, but it should be. Weird, there's not a second washer in here. I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be a second washer between the inner, or the outer bearings inner race and the outer nut. I mean, it's not hugely imperative, because if the inner race is spinning on the shaft, then, or on the spindle, then it means that the spindle is hored out and you need to get a new spindle. Or you can have the spindle turned down, you can have new sleeve pressed on, then you can have the sleeve machined down to the size of the outer bearings inner shaft. But I mean, at that point, it's going to be more expensive than just buying a new spindle, I'm sure, because the spindle just bolts on. But anyways, Yeah, you want to check the spindle for like wear marks and scoring to make sure the bearing didn't seize. At this point too, it'd be a good time to check for breakage in the well, in the caliper, of course, and in the lockout hubs. You want to inspect everything for cracks as well. The hub, the spindle, the steering knuckle. You can inspect your ball joint boots and your universal joint there. And oh, there goes the van. Bye, van. This thing has Rancho adjustable shocks in it too. Sicky dope. And yeah, I'd also recommend greasing your slip joint at this time and like doing a full inspection underneath. I think this one has greasable shackles on it. At least it does in the back there, which is pretty good. I really like greasable shackles. I get why they don't put bearings in these, you know, like a needle bearing or even just a bushing that you grease, but I mean, it isolates vibrations and stuff, but like, holy shit, it would really not make you have a fucking rubber bushing if you were to just like, you know, do the thing with bushings or bearings. But anyways, so now we can pull this hub off, and as you can see, yeah, that inner bearing is now separated. So I'm gonna use the pick, pull that bearing out, and then pull the hub off, and then we can pop the seal out. This doesn't happen, but apparently this bearing is like at one with the spindle here. So like I was saying, or like I wasn't saying, because I didn't say, but anyways, this one must have gotten like pressed on or be cockeyed or something on there, which is weird because the bearing itself looks fine. Like there's not a lot of pitting and stuff on there. But yeah, it pulled the rear seal out with it too, so that's convenient. And yeah, that was the bearing that I was talking, or the washer that I was talking about between the outer bearing there. You can see it's got a tang on it, and this one faces outward. Goes behind the inner nut, in front of that bearing. What the hell? No, like, look at that. See, that cage is bent. The cage is bent on both sides on the outer bearings. That's just the weirdest thing you ever seen, because like the bearings look fine. There's no pitting. They all seem to move fine. The bearings don't look cattywampus, or the rollers. Weird. Very weird. I guess the more you look, the more you find, eh? Yeah. Squeegee the grease off. Probably use a slide hammer to get this sucker off. Honestly, too, if it's too big of a pain in the ass, we'll just pack some grease in it and ignore it. Except that we can't because we gotta get the new seal on it. So like, yeah, this isn't great. Not enjoying that. These are not supposed to be pressed on bearings. Yeah, like I said, inspect it for, oh, you can't see a damn thing. Inspect that shaft back here for signs of heat and scoring, like the inner race was spinning on that spindle. Because you can see it's got these 6 studs and nuts, and you can pull that spindle off. But because if that inner race has been spinning, then you're going to need a new spindle or machine a solution. So I'm no machinist, though. I kind of wish I were a machinist. That sounds lit. Okay, so fucking grease, god damn. There are 6 9/16 nuts holding the spindle on. So I undid the nuts, and they're on the ground there now. As you can see, they're nuts. And then I'm going to use like a plastic hammer, I think, or maybe the rubber mallet. Yeah, start with the rubber mallet since it's closer, and then yep, beat it back and forth, make sure it's free, and then I don't know how the fuck I'm gonna get this thing off, because like this heat shield in the back is not going to be my friend. Okay. I'm use the oversized pry bar to take the thin little heat shield off, which I think, yeah, it goes in this orientation. You can see around the brackets there. You really can't clock it a whole lot, because if you do, then like you won't be able to get your brake caliper in. So next step is work this sucker back and forth. Now, just remember, inside of this spindle, there's going to be a bushing. So you can see this moves. There'll be a bushing in there, and you'll want to check it and then see if it's like all worn out, which this one feels like it is. But honestly, I don't really hear them cause a lot of problems. Then again, I'm not a Jeep expert. Last thing I worked on like this was my old Ford, but I didn't give a fuck about that. It was so loud you couldn't hear it anyways. My old Toyota, though, was very similar to this. And I don't remember if I replaced the bushings in there or not. Where the fuck is my screwdriver? Well, it's, oh, I was going to say it's in God's hands, but it's not. It's in my hands now. I mean, but it's in God's hands still if you believe it is. But anyhow, yeah, I'm going to drive a screwdriver in here and wedge this. And not a prank driver, my ass. Anyways, and then we'll take a look inside of here, and then I'm going to go ask somebody else who deals with these regularly what they think about this surface, because like both of those are scored to shit. I didn't see any scoring on the other side, and the bearings seemed to go on just fine, although the cage was kind of bent on the one of them, so that's not like great, but at least it didn't look like this. Like that's some heat. And the inside of this bearing too kind of looks like it's had some spinning going on. Like that looks like I took some sandpaper or something to it, but I didn't because I haven't sanded it yet. And I mean, I could beat it back on there, but you can see that bearing was literally hanging on by like a fucking 3/16 of an inch. It was not much. So, yeah. This is what the bullshit looks like off of it. And as you can see, there's no bushing. There's actually a little needle bearing in there, which I'm not going to fuck with because it looks fun. I'm just going to pack some grease into it. And then make sure that your sealing surface in the back here looks good and clean it up some brake clean and a rag. Kippered herring coming back to haunt me. And then you've got like this, I think it's not quite a square cut seal. It's got like a little ridge in it like that. And then it's square on the front. And then you've got this outer dust boot. Just make sure that this looks fine. And it all looks fine. And it's all still supple. So, we'll just run it. I mean, these generally don't cause a problem. Oh, and I think there's a thrust washer back there too. So I'm going to pack some grease into all that when we put it back together. But yeah, no, I think I'm going to ask this guy if he wants to buy a spindle or not. And beforehand, I'm going to go on Napa and look if I can get another spindle because like, not great. And I'd probably have to get that bearing too because once that bearing's in there, there's not really a great way to grab it and get it out. I mean, you could use a slide hammer to get it out, but like, well, there's a spider. I'm gonna get the butt. I'm gonna get the butt. Butt. I got the butt. WHAST size 1. Okay, so I PB blasted all these lug studs. See that R on there? That doesn't stand for retard. That stands for right, as in right-hand thread. Sometimes there'll be an L on them, and that's left-hand thread, which is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. Like I had an 83 Ford with a Dana 70U in the back, and it was a left-hand thread on the one side, and I just about snapped the lug nuts off trying to tighten them, when in reality I was trying to loosen them. Anyhow, put a lug nut on, and then you can drive them out. Whoa, that one came out way too easy. Ew. I don't like that. That's not great. Yeah, and just thread that lug nut on, and then drive her out. Let's see if they're all like that. Now that one's more like it. Like whack-a-mole, except there's only one mole, and this mole isn't dying. Yep. And so just remember that once your lug studs are out, you can pull this rotor apart, and then that hub goes like that. And there's some witness marks on the back of this rotor. Whoever did this last bought some Chinese Yamato Zone retard rotors, which isn't great because they just fucking warp. Like first thing out of the box, like I don't trust O'Reilly or AutoZone, especially not AutoZone. O'Reilly actually has some decent shit. You can sometimes get Motorcraft parts through them. AutoZone has like nothing redeeming about it. Like you go in there and you just want to die. Like every time I go in there, I'm like, wow, I want to die. I do all my business through Napa, but they're uppity because it's Bozeman and they fucking charge you 900% on everything. But yeah, the CarQuest out in Three Forks is fucking mint. Like that guy is mint. Anyways, so yeah, once you do that, then you can look at the stuff and the things and make sure that nothing's running or rubbing. And make sure that the races look good and all that other stuff. Evening, even though it looks like the same evening because I didn't get out of bed this morning. Anyhow, dabs red thread locker on each, or blue thread locker rather, on each of these studs. I'm going to take them to 50 pounds, I think. That seems like a reasonable number. Also, I replaced the 2 seals in the back there. That lip seal, which, I mean, shoot, I could probably show you if I can get this thing out. You want to clean the circumference of the mounting flange here, as well as the inside of the knuckle, and then replace the 2 seals and grease up that thrust washer. Remember, the thrust washer is directional. Oh, there's a spider. Look at it go. Anyhow, Yeah, clean those up and then put a little grease on them. Not a lot, because that dust boot's just going to attract dust. Put a lot of grease on it. And then go ahead and put the nuts on and tighten it to 50 pounds. Then drive your bearing and seal in there. I use the 320 grit emery cloth to clean the surface up. And I'm really hoping that the tightness of the nut will keep the races from spinning on this spindle. Don't forget to put your backing plate on before you put these on and torque them down. I did 50 pounds again, like I said earlier. Just checking to see here. That bearing doesn't go on like that. So the inner bearing is sold with a new race. So I beat the old race out of it. This race actually looks fine, and you can reuse races, but I try not to on front end parts. So I'm going to beat a new race into it, and again, make sure that you do it this way, because the cone style bearings are supposed to be opposed. The outer bearings cone faces inwards, and the inner bearings cone faces outwards. So that way you can tighten it, and it'll take the axial and radial loads. Anyhow, yeah, you can put a little grease on this and then drive it in. I use the longer drift to drive it out, and I'll probably use the shorter drift with greater dexterity to drive it. So when you're beating this race in, you got to be real careful that your drift, as you're hammering, doesn't slide off and score the riding surface of the race. I mean, like a tiny little scratch, like I slipped once and it just barely nicked it, it's fine. But if you really deeply gouge it, you're going to have to replace the race. Also notice here, it might be a little hard to see, but where's my pick at? Oh. Yeah, so right here is a little lip above this race. And that signifies that your race is driven all the way in. You want to make sure that that's the case. Also, the tone of the ting that you'll have as you drive it in will change. It'll change from two disparate notes about a half step apart to one solid ting that reverberates throughout the casting of the hub. It's the best way I can explain it. Anyhow, yeah, you'll also feel it stop moving. So. Excuse me, there it is. Pack your bearing. I've got a bearing packer, but you can also do it by hand. I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there on that. Anyhow, make sure that your grease is coming all the way through it. What I also like to do is, shouldn't put that back in there, is take some grease and then line the inside of this race with grease. Actually, I can set it there like this. Yeah. So just get a nice coating of grease all the way like that all the way around the inside of the bearing race. And yeah, as you can see, there's some marks in there from where that bearing was riding unevenly. Of course, the retards there didn't sell me a new fucking bearing race for it, so whatever, they just sell me the bearing. That's stupid. That's just dumb. Anyways, the wider inner race is for the inner bearing, the narrower inner race is for the outer bearing. The spindle steps down. So, yeah, I like to both pack the bearing and add grease to the race as I am putting it together, just because I like everything to have grease. And just remember, the reason that you have to pack these bearings is because this grease doesn't migrate. In fact, over time and heavy loads, the grease will all get forced out of the bearings. So it's really important that you regularly service these. I put a little bit of grease inside of the hub just to prevent any rust or anything, should water intrude into the hub. But, I mean, realistically, it's not going to do jack shit. You're really just relying on the bearing to hold on to its own grease. Really, what you see right here is all that's lubricating this bearing. Yeah, and then I'll also go through and I'll scrape this grease out, and then I'll pack a little more in, take my finger and squidge some in here before I drive that green seal in. And this seal does not say install dry. So it's a metal clad seal, so I got to clean that grease off, and that the green paint on it actually forms a seal between the metal clad seal and the body of the hub here. So yeah, you want to make sure that that's nice and clean. It's less important on these greased hubs because they're non-Newtonian liquid versus like gear oil, which behaves more like a Newtonian liquid under its hot operating temperature, will migrate past that seal. That's why you want to have it clean and clear of grease and rust. So, yeah. Now your seal faces outward this way, so make sure that the oil side is facing in. This is the air side. And then that block of wood, that block of 2x4 is what I'm going to set across it to drive it in. Because when you try to drive these fuckers in by hand, they always caulk out of their hole. So, pain in the ass, but again, you want to take your time and make sure you don't warp the seal as you're driving it in. Because if you warp it, then you got to go buy a new one. Because it can't be warped, you know, like that and then that, or else it won't seal, you know. Yeah, I'm currently about halfway through Nietzsche's book, The Antichrist, which is a very, very interesting take on Christianity. Homeboy did not like Christianity at all. Which, I mean, I don't blame him for. Oh, wow, this one actually went in. Hot damn. Last one fought me. Oh, yeah, and another note. The sealing surface is supposed to be 600 grit or finer, especially on something that's going to be in contact with light oil. I've replaced pinion seals and stuff, and output shaft housing, or output whatever fucking seals on like old Fords, and I used that 320 grit emery cloth like I used on the bearing surface here, and it leaked. And then I used 600 grit wet sandpaper, the black stuff that doesn't leave the little bits of corundum and garnet and whatever behind that will ruin your seal. I used that on the sealing surface, and I just barely cleaned it up. I didn't really go real aggressive on it because there's no real lip here. So yeah, 600 grit, 320, 320, and then leave these threads alone, maybe clean them off with some bullshit. And wipe it down with a paper towel before you put this hub back on. Clean off your lug studs. And then I'm putting blue thread locker on them because I don't want these fucking things to come out. And then I'm spreading it evenly around the splines. And then you're just gonna drop those in there. And I know it looks wrong to have the brake caliper facing this way, but this is correct. I'm not a huge fan of these Dana axles. I mean, it's the same thing on like a Dana 70. You got to fucking pull not only the axle shaft, but you've also got to pull the hub to replace the brakes. And it's the same thing on this. Like, they very clearly could have mounted the rotor on the face of this and then fucking welded the lug studs or pressed them in, but instead you just hammer them in. It's kind of a Mickey Mouse way of doing it. Anyways, so yeah, distribute the blue thread locker if you're going to do it. You can also use red thread locker. You know, I'm a pretty big fan of that. I just don't have any on hand right now, or I'd use it. And then, again, take one of your punches and punch them all the way in until the shoulder of this lug stud is flush with the rotor here. Don't forget to clean these rotor surfaces off. A lot of times they'll have cosmoline on them, so that's why I use brake parts cleaner. That's literally what that's for. Great light hard studs are driven in up to the shoulder. And that one I really had to give the love of God. What I'm going to do is attempt to get this on. So this bearing was still catching something fierce on this lip. So I'm going to coat everything here in grease right up to here so that seal has something to ride on. And just a light coat, nothing heavy, especially where the seal is, because all it's going to do is shove grease out back here and trap dirt. And that dirt will get back into the seal through time and wear it out. So again, only a thin, light coat. And then we'll lube all this up, make sure I didn't damage any of the threads, and we'll lube this shaft up as well. We'll go ahead and slide the hub on with the rear bearing in place, and I'm going to leave the front bearing out so I have the dexterity to move it up and back and forth and side to side. And I'm going to try to slide it on there as straight as possible because this lip is just giving me hell, which is really weird because you wouldn't have thought that would have made it harder to get on after I did all that sanding. I mean, at least I can get it on now, but it might need more sanding. Anyhow, yeah, you can see where stuff's been scored, where they tried peening it to get the inner race to stick, but you can't find these Dana 30 spindles anymore. At least I think this is a Dana 30. It's such a cute little axle. So small. Anyways, oh yeah, and then you can use this guy, this threaded hole, to pull the stub shaft through if you need to, there it is, to expose that snap ring. When you're putting that hub back on. Anyways, catch you in a minute. Okay, so you've got the washer in behind the, or the small washer in behind the inner nut. So go ahead and tighten it up until there's no slack in it. And then you'll notice that the bearing, oh, god damn it, you piece of shit. You'll notice the bearings spin very freely. And then I'm going to take it and just do a smidgen more now that I've tightened it and loosened it. And then we'll put the outer nut on. Right. That's fairly good. This outer one's tight, and then I just kind of jammed the washer there up against the nuts. That way it won't fall or won't come loose. Next thing I think I'm going to do is put the brake caliper on. I'm going to grab the 2 bolts right there, and we're going to put the pads in, slide the caliper over, and then we will put the caliper on, and then we'll put the brake line. So I've heard it that mechanics will tell you, oh, all cars are shit. And yeah, all cars are shit. Big whoop. Like, okay, I get it. To take the fucking struts out of that Tacoma, you got to, like, pop the front ball joint loose. Big whoop. For this fucking brake caliper, it uses unprotected fucking sliding surfaces, so all those are going to do is seize up, and they're going to wear your inner pad out, and you're not actually going to be able to see it on your outer pad, and it's going to toast your rotor. B, there's nothing holding in the inner shim and fucking brake pad. So you go to put it on, and this rotor's full thickness, and these pads are full thickness, so your piston's all the way at full stop, but it still fucking fights you, so you got to hammer the brake fucking rotor over it. You know, with a rubber mallet, you do it lightly because you don't want to go ham and fuck your brake pads up. But you got to do that, and you've also got to hold this pad in place because there's a shim behind it, and the fucking thing is barely indexed into its little slots that it slides in. And then this outside one isn't held in by anything either. Like, look at that. It just free floats. See, fucking Dodge and AMC both pulled this bullshit. I really do like old Fords, and I really do like old Toyotas because they didn't... Like, why? Why is the rotor behind the fucking hub? Huh? Why the fuck is the rotor behind the hub? That's stupid. That's why I like the Visteon 10 1/4, the Sterling 10 1/4. You know, you get a Dana 70 or a Dana 80, you got to pull the fucking hub off to do the brakes. That's stupid. The bearings aren't making any noise. I change the diff oil regularly. Like, it shouldn't be a problem. Sorry. Yeah, goddamn. Put blue thread locker on the Dodge bolts. There's one here and then one down below. Right there. Yeah, these 2. And then make sure your crush washer, you got one on each side of this block. And put your banjo bolt in here. This union fitting. And tighten it down to 7/16. Right. So, let us grab the socket. I think we'll need 7/16. Go ahead and first thread the bleeder screw in. A couple threads. Or thread it in all the way and then unscrew it a couple threads. I'm going to have to bleed this. Next thing, notice this has 2 washers, put one on each side, and then thread this in. I just had to fucking take this thing back apart because apparently this pile of Dodge garbage has brake shims between the fucking pads and the caliper. Go figure. Thank you, Dodge. Right, so, once you get this one tightened up, I just use that crescent wrench. Don't go ham on it. Like, you need to get tight so the copper crushes out, but you don't need to go much more than that. Put your bleeder back in. Then I'm putting my lugs or my spacer back on. I use blue thread locker on these as well. Then I'm taking each of these 13/16 nuts to 75 pounds. But the other thing that you got to note is it's going to take a minute for it to get out, and you're going to feel a lot of resistance because you got to draw that lug stud the rest of the way into this hub assembly. Yeah, because it's got to press the last little bit in. So do that, and then you'll feel it start to resist. So I've already got this one to 75 pounds, and then you can jam a pry bar between your new lug stud and the hub, and that'll keep it from rotating. And then that one we'll just have to do. All right, so slap some grease into this fucking hub assembly, and then pop it on, and then make sure that it goes in. It's being stubborn, but you want this shoulder to slide all the way in. I know what's happening. The axle shaft's pushed to one side, so I'm going to have to use a screwdriver to pop it in, or maybe a punch and a plastic hammer to beat it in. Once you do that, then you're going to have to pull this axle shaft out far enough you can put the C-clip on. There is the snap ring. And then you can't really see it down in there, but there's a groove that's now exposed. What I did was I used one of these hub bolts, and I put it cockeyed in there, and then I pulled it out, and that seems to work. The threads grab against each other. And then you're going to use the external type snap ring pliers to put this guy on. I don't really think orientation matters. Looks like it's been put on both ways because there's witness marks on both sides. Yeah, so then just expand it apart, expand the 2 ears apart, slide it over, and then put it in its groove. Razor blade, straight razor blade, and the thing. And then I got an abrasive whizzy wheel, but this is like the nylon stuff or whatever. And then brake clean. Clean up your sealing surface and wipe out this surface. Pack some grease into these splines before you put it on.
Take those 9/16 bolts once it's on and it's pushed all the way in, and you'll have to force it against the spring. In the back there, make sure it's not cockeyed, and then tighten those down to, I don't know, say 15 foot-pounds. That ought to be enough. I'm going to put some of the Permatex Right stuff around the outside of this. Don't put any on the inside. I don't think it's really necessary, just the outside here. Really right along this inside edge of the outside. Right, take your Chinesium torque wrench and whatever, and tighten all these bolts, or torque them to, I don't know, I did 15 pounds. And then I went over them with my ratchet here and torqued them a little further. Make sure that your wheel spins freely, so you can hear just a slight bit of drag on those brakes, but still spins pretty freely. So, yeah, that about completes it. Put your wheel back on. I want to torque it to, like, I don't know, 70 pounds or something, maybe 100, somewhere in there. You know, it's big old tires, so it needs it. And then bleed your brakes. I gotta bleed the brakes, so I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna show that though. Bye.